Most of these plants exist as a single specimen, or close to it, somewhere on Earth right now. Here are 8 of the rarest plants alive, and how each one is holding on. Ghost orchid. This orchid has no leaves at all, and most people who spot one in the wild think they're looking at nothing. Its roots do the work leaves usually do, absorbing sunlight and turning it into energy, while the plant itself stays wrapped flat against tree bark, nearly invisible. Its seeds are so small they carry almost no stored food, so they can't even sprout without a specific fungus already living in the soil to feed them. Add to that a single moth species with a tongue long enough to reach its nectar, and every part of this plant's survival depends on something else showing up first. Around 2,000 are thought to survive in the swamps of southern Florida, most of them clustered in one protected stretch of cypress forest. Losing that one habitat would mean losing most of what's left. A plant this dependent on everything around it going right is also a plant with almost no room left for anything to go wrong, and it's far from the only one on this list holding its entire existence together by a thread this thin. Wood cycad. One plant pushed an entire species toward extinction in the wild, just by being the only one anyone ever found. Cycads need a separate male and a separate female to reproduce, the way many trees do. In 1895, a botanist found a single specimen growing in a South African forest. It was male. Despite repeated searches of the same forest ever since, no female has ever turned up. Every woods cycad alive today, and estimates range from around 100 to several hundred plants in gardens and collections worldwide, is a clone taken from that one original specimen. Because they're so valuable, many are kept under lock and key to protect them from poachers. They can grow, flower, and produce pollen. What they can't do is reproduce naturally, because the other half of the equation may simply not exist anymore. Researchers are now crossing it with a closely related species, hoping to breed something close enough to count. It's a slow, uncertain fix for a problem that started with one missing plant in one forest. Middlemist's red. Only 2 of this flower exist anywhere on Earth, and neither one is growing where it originally came from. It was brought out of China in 1804 by a nurseryman who had no idea he was carrying out the last of its kind. Despite the name, the flower isn't actually red at all. It opens in a deep, saturated pink that only gets called red in the history books. Within a few decades, the flower vanished entirely from its native range, most likely wiped out by overharvesting. The 2 cuttings that survived, one planted in a London conservatory and one in a New Zealand garden, are now the only living record that this flower ever existed in the wild at all. Neither garden sells cuttings. There's no seed packet, no nursery listing, no legal way to simply buy one, because doing so would mean cutting into one of the only 2 plants left. Every other flower on this list at least has a wild population somewhere trying to hang on. This one doesn't have that option anymore. Café marron. A schoolboy found this plant on a nature walk in 1979, and it turned out to be the last one left on Earth. The species had been presumed extinct since the 1950s, known only from a single sketch made by a visitor passing through the island a century earlier. A teacher sent students out looking for anything unusual, and one of them came back with a cutting that matched the old drawing almost exactly. Botanists confirmed it, one wild plant and nothing else. Getting it to reproduce took over 2 decades. The plant flowered normally in cultivation but refused to set seed until researchers discovered that a burst of heat during pollination was somehow the missing trigger. The first viable seeds finally appeared in 2003. One of the plants further along this list has an even stranger rediscovery story behind it, found by accident in a place nobody thought to look. The world's loneliest tree. This tree spent decades as the only one of its kind left alive, and it eventually found a way to become its own mate. Botanists found it in 1945 on a remote island off the coast of New Zealand, a single tree growing alone on a steep, goat-proof slope, the last known survivor of its kind anywhere on Earth. Cuttings taken in the 1950s kept a backup growing safely elsewhere, but a cutting from one tree still can't produce seed on its own, not without something else to pollinate it. Decades later, researchers found the answer hiding inside the tree's own flowers, tiny, functional traces of male anatomy that close relatives usually lose completely as they mature. In 1985, they used that leftover trace of pollen to fertilize the tree's own blossoms. It worked, and the resulting seeds grew into trees that have since gone on to produce seeds of their own. One tree, alone on a cliff for who knows how long, had been quietly running a backup plan the entire time. Franklin tree. Nobody has seen this tree growing in the wild since 1803, and nobody knows exactly why it disappeared. Two botanists first spotted it in 1765, growing along a short stretch of one river in Georgia, and nowhere else they ever recorded. They collected seeds and grew them in a garden hundreds of miles away. Within 40 years, the wild population was gone. Flood, fire, disease, overcollection, all have been proposed. None has ever been confirmed. Every Franklin tree alive today in gardens across the world descends from those original seeds. The wild population that produced them never got a second chance. A plant can outlive its own habitat by decades, sometimes centuries, if just one person happens to save a handful of seeds first, or if someone simply happens to check the right cliff at the right time. Jellyfish tree. This tree was declared extinct for nearly 70 years until someone found it growing on a hillside anyway. It gets its name from its fruit, which splits open into a shape that genuinely resembles a small jellyfish. No one had recorded a living specimen since the early 1900s, and by the 1970s, it was written off in every survey of the island. Then, a handful of trees turned up on bare granite outcrops where almost nothing else could take root, growing in cracks too small and too exposed for most plants to bother trying. Even now, its seeds barely germinate on their own in the wild, and estimates of the surviving population still range from under a dozen to a few dozen trees, all on a single island. Botanists have to intervene just to get new trees started on a population small enough to still be counted by hand. Extinct, it turns out, sometimes just means nobody has looked in the right crack in the rock yet. Dwarf ebony. This plant was written off as extinct for over 100 years until two bushes turned up on a cliff nobody had bothered to climb. Goats introduced centuries earlier had stripped the island's forests bare, and by 1850 the plant was assumed gone for good, its dense black wood only ever found washed up on beaches or dug out of dry stumps, a relic of forests that no longer existed. Then, in November 1980, two botanists spotted a small shrub growing on a remote cliff edge between two rock formations. It matched nothing currently known to be alive. It was the plant everyone had already given up on. From those two surviving bushes, thousands of new plants have since been grown from cuttings and seed, many of them replanted across the island where the species once thrived. The forest that goats erased over centuries is being rebuilt from two shrubs that happen to grow somewhere hooves could never reach. Sometimes the rarest plant on Earth spent a century sitting in plain sight, just on a cliff nobody happened to climb.